Everyone wants to feel confident and 100% capable of learning novel things. And yet, we seldom allow new pathways of thinking, feeling, and being to lead our experiences. Live into 5D weekly episodes are akin to personal agency microdosing, perking insights that lead to breakthrough action. In today's episode, NLP Coach, educator, intuitive healer Vicchi Oleski is joined by Rev Dailey Little, a full-time energy healer, spiritual teacher, and certified life and business coach. As a mixed-race Black and Japanese American woman living the creative life in Northern California, Rev Little started out a very psychic child. Born into a religious Buddhist family who continues to feel a deep curiosity about metaphysics, religion, and magical traditions of all kinds. As a Reiki master priestess, Dailey's ongoing study of self-awareness methods, mindful-based meditation, nonviolent communication, and yoga help to keep her perspective fresh and full of vitality. Thank you, listener, for coming along with us, and thanks to our guest on today's program. Now, welcome, Reverend Dailey Little.
Dailey Little, it's Vicchi Oleski.
Hello.
We just got done checking in, so thank you so much again for joining Live Into 5D, Waking Up Our Nature podcast. I want to welcome you. I want to welcome all the listeners, newbies to what 5D is really about. We have Reverend Dailey Little, Priestess, shamanic practitioner. Should I add that? Yes. Okay.
Sure.
The heavy hitters, the esoteric heavy hitters. Not making light and play out of that, honestly. Because it can get, I don't know if you've been there, but I've been in the depths and darkness and shadow of what it really does mean to live into 5D and what that means for each and every one of us. It's such it's a personal, individual, as well as a collective balancing act.
Yeah.
I want to just go right to you and with you. When we say Reverend, give us a little bit of your background. I know that we share a little bit of our practice. Well, a lot of practices together, quite honestly.
Right, we do. Absolutely.
But specifically for today's show, I wanted to just talk with you about, being a priestess, being a Reiki master, and a reverend. And then, the real mom stuff, a community member, a healer. Tell us a little bit about that. I want to know some of your, bring me up to speed, Dailey.
Okay. Yeah. First, I just want to say, Vicchi, it's so nice to be here because I remember meeting you years ago and feeling like I found a kindred spirit, and I think the spiritual path, the modern spiritual path, is so unique because we're not beholden to one set of beliefs in order to really find our connection with spirit. And so I've spent my life meeting amazing people, But I don't always meet people that have the same value markers or the same deities that they work with or spiritual callings. And so it's really cool to be here because I know you and I have so many differences too. And I think that makes us even stronger together and as a community, because we're able to pool that with this kind of like-minded heart about what we're really trying to like manifest on this planet, what we're trying to create in our communities. So yeah, today I think is just a very special, beautiful day to connect in this way and be present.
Thank you, Dailey. I loved, and thank you so much for phrasing, modern spirituality, the upgrades that we individually go through, and then how it shakes out into our homes, our families, our communities. I really appreciate you bringing that out. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And Reverend is not a title that I ever thought I would add to my name. When I was young, I was really psychic and intuitive, but I was also raised really Buddhist. And in the Buddhist tradition that I practiced, I was kind of told, oh, well, it's natural that you may have some psychic awakening when you're doing these practices and when your life is really coming into harmony, because it's actually part of the gift of being human to have this profound spiritual connection with the people in the world around you. And it just takes getting quiet to really hear and work with those threads. So I was told by many of my Buddhist elders, like, don't worry so much about that. Just live, just figure out how to be happy and how to have a purpose and go for it. And I think that I needed more. I needed a lot more because I was having pretty profound experiences where I would have dreams about family members or friends or even people I didn't know. And they were extremely detailed. And I knew things that I shouldn't have known in any way, shape, or form. So I wanted to understand why, and that led me on a several years kind of spiritual, religious journey of joining different churches and organizations and getting involved in earth-based spirituality, all looking for answers that were really metaphysical in nature. So in that path, actually very early on, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I had a dream, and it was like a visionary initiation. I was surrounded by goddesses, and I knew them all in my young head. Like I was like, oh, there's Artemis, Diana, like whatever, you hear myths and stories growing up and you just have this idea. And I didn't know whether this was a made up dream or an actual channel at that time, now I know it's a channel, but there was a goddess in that dream and her name was Isis, and she was Egyptian, and she was sitting on a throne, and she looked beautiful, but kind of serious and stern. And in the dream vision, I was like, who are you? I know all these people. I don't know you. And she said, I'm Isis. And I said, okay, that doesn't tell me anything. Like, I don't know who you are, why you're here in this magical initiation dream. She said, it's okay.
Couldn't you Google Isis at the moment?
No, I was in it. I was like in. So, oh my God, now if you Googled ISIS, you'd probably end up on like a government watch list, but, and that's a different ISIS, but in this dream, she said, it doesn't matter. Don't worry. I'm your mother and I'm your guide and I'm here for you. And it'll all make sense in time. So I had a series of really bizarre real life human waking experiences with this goddess throughout my teens and 20s, and especially in my 20s when I was living in LA doing costume design and dancing. And finally, like one day, I ended up in front of this magical shop after so many things that like it was as if this goddess was sending me on journeys. I'd have like a message or a feeling in my heart to go someplace, and I would literally just drive in the streets. Like, I don't even know where I'm going, but I know that I'm literally taking directions from spirit by now. And I ended up in front of this shop, And I just stopped there and I was like, what am I doing here? I don't even know what part of LA this is. I mean, it wasn't a bad part, thankfully, but because I was probably naive that I would have ended up there. And I got out and there was a brand new little magical shop that had opened at the time. And I didn't know about it, which was a surprise of its own because I was really into stuff. And on the wall there, on the outside, like the glass, there was a flyer that said, like, Mysteries of Isis class. And it was starting in 2 days. And I thought, I've been led here to take this random class, like to learn. And so I went inside and I said, hey, I see this class. It's starting like in a couple days. Yeah, sure. I'll make the drive out here. Do you have space? I want to sign up. And she said, you are so lucky. There's only one spot left. So I'll give it to you. It's a packed class. And literally as I was signing up and giving her my money, the phone rang and somebody else was trying to get into the class. And she's like, I'm sorry, it's booked out. It's done. So I took this class and it was from a priestess of Isis. And I was very skeptical. I felt like a know-it-all. I'd been studying ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. I knew how to read some of them. I was into it so deeply beyond this class. But I'd had a dream and Isis had told me prior in this dream, this goddess, like, you're getting so deep in metaphysics and channeling and aspecting deities and all of these things, you will be a danger to yourself unless you have human support in guiding these gifts and learning more about how to tend yourself as a human. So this class in many ways was like my first introduction, my first commitment to this goddess. And it was a short class with a beautiful initiation ceremony in it, like a 4-week class. And then after that, I think that was like the bus. I got on the goddess bus and I didn't even know it at the time. And I was so afraid in my life of being seen as like a flighty, new agey person that believed in crazy things that couldn't possibly be true. I was so skeptical about things. And yet I felt so at home, really learning about spirituality in new ways and beginning to understand sacred geometry and metaphysics in ways that I hadn't before. And I worked with a series of different teachers. I learned in a bunch of different places. And finally, like a decade later, I again got this message from the goddess.
Dailey, what year are we talking? Like, we know how old you are, but like, was this when you're saying new age? What year are we talking?
Probably the early 2000s.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So yeah, that was a big
between 96 and 2004.
Yeah. Okay. So that the new age.
Things were still unwrapped. They were pretty wrapped up at that time, like in communities. I think like TV shows like Charmed opened up so much. Harry Potter opened up a different kind of consciousness around magic and witchcraft and spirituality. So ultimately, long story short, Isis was like, you need to get ordained by a human. Like, I require it. This is happening. She told me where, and it was the Fellowship of Isis. And I was very skeptical, as I have probably been through most of my spiritual journey. But after that ordination, it was very magical, really beautiful story of its own. And after that ordination, I really understood that the work that I'd been doing, I'd been co-facilitating pagan groups and Buddhist groups and standing sort of in these places of leadership and sort of hiding. And I think finally, like, Reverend was just the title that I took because I was ordained. Like, I was actually legally ordained. So I've done weddings and I've presided over challenging times for people and done mediation work and that kind of thing. But to me, Reverend is really a way of saying I've taken the spiritual path and I stand in the light with that. As a priestess, my vow is to the goddess, Isis of 10,000 names. And I really am here to hold her channel and voice for people who need it. As a reverend, I'm here for people, for my community, for humans who sometimes need a little inspiration, sometimes need a little direction or support so that community can thrive.
Wow, I love that you just spoke this huge question for people. I think even in my own understanding and knowing you and knowing other practitioners, healers, professionals in the transformational arts, how, what is the discernment between priestess and reverend?
Yeah.
So the priestess is really in service to the entity.
I mean, I do think different people hold it differently, and that again, that is part of the modern spiritual path. That there's ever since the seal was broken on Christianity in the 1700s, and theosophy happened, thought work happened. People think whatever they want to think, but yeah, I mean, for myself and just the way that I've really witnessed and experienced in life, I feel that as priestess, we're here to tend the altars, the fires, the spiritual heart of that divine connection. And I think specifically priestess versus priest, like a man or a woman or anybody can be a priest or a priestess. I actually think of the term priestess as a naming of its own that can belong to anyone of any gender, because I feel that it actually refers to the sacred feminine and an energetic way in which we hold space and reconnect people with the womb of the earth, with the lava, the lifeblood, the passion, the energetic essence of this planet. And that's all connected to deity.
My own practices and studies of esoteric and science and spirituality, it's really starting to be quite colloquial that we're talking about the yin energy, the priestess, divine feminine, as the energy of receptivity. So it's not gender specific. And in the world of energy, that so fits. It's so helpful for people. I think that's what I'm noticing is that it's becoming, and I will steer away from mainstream because that's not even, it's not a term that that I think is helpful anymore. I think that post 2020, it's like we haven't even moved away from that. There is a mainstream, but it has changed dramatically, even with the understanding of that we are energetic beings. Again, bringing why we're having this conversation is that, we are material, bones, blood, everything. And at the same time, we are becoming evolved in our earthly practices, and that has not been something that I think in this new iteration of again, I say post 2020, but we're barely post, postpartum, now we're like, geez. The other thing I wanted to just say is I loved back a moment or two ago, you were talking about susceptibility. And I thought that was such a great, can you tell me a little bit what you meant by that? Because I was like, oh, that perked a big interest for me.
Like when I was speaking about the being very skeptical about things, or?
Yes, right there. I feel like that is even way changed people's games around skepticism, given the whole world of disinformation. We're all becoming our own scientists, literally, or I hope we are, watching this program. But tell me a little bit more about that, because I think that there's a little subtle sweet spot of a year that can open us up to curiosity about new dimensions, even if we're still here, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is like I'm trying to figure out how, like, all that's in my head, how to say it tiny, but like, part of this whole 5D thing, right, is like, there's so many dimensions to what it means to be alive and to be existing. We're living in so many multiple planes of reality at a time. And I loved the explanation that someone gave years ago, that it's kind of like if you were looking at a beautiful oil painting on a wall, a man standing at a desk, let's say. I don't know why that would be beautiful, but like a man standing at a desk in a painting, and you're just looking at it and you're like, oh, it's gorgeous. I love the colors. I could stand here forever. And that painting, you have an understanding of it because you've just been with it. And then somebody points out, like, it's actually like not a painting. It's a vignette and you can walk inside of it. And you're like, what? I didn't realize that. Like, I mean, I thought my eyesight was good, but they're like, it has nothing to do with your eyesight. You just have been so used to seeing paintings on walls. It never occurred to you if you just move forward and touch it and step through the frame, you would find actually that it's 3-dimensional. It's not 2-dimensional or whatnot, And so then you step in and you're like, oh, wait, there's so much more here. I never realized that this man at the desk, that there's things behind the desk, that there's a little puppy sitting here looking up adoringly at him, that there's flowers off to the left of the frame. Like, who knew? This world is bigger than I thought. And so here we are living in this reality, and even this reality is so much bigger than we thought. And I think when we're growing up, we're taught to see everything in one way, right? It's like, it maybe because of fear. Like religion can be great. It can be a key to opening up our perspectives. But when I was being raised and in the life that I was living, even though there was a lot of openness about what could be, there are certain social programs that we're all socialized into, like here in the United States, all over the world, programs around what spirituality should look like, what is allowed or not allowed. For the longest time, it was that if you have any spiritual gifts, they have to come through and be ordained by a Christian God, or you're from the devil. And whether we believe that or not on a personal level, those social programs really shape our sense of safety and of what we allow ourselves to actually perceive and experience on a day-to-day life. And so growing up, like, I knew I was really psychic. I knew that there were things in the world. I knew that there was a lot more than I could see, And yet I had like this deep penetrating fear that maybe that was wrong, that maybe if I mentioned those things to the wrong person, that I could be ostracized for that, broken down for that. It's like it connects to this idea of like witches burning on crosses and deep persecution, which is a wound that affects all of us in our consciousness, no matter what we believe. So I think like the scientific leanings of the last 150 years and the science that has evolved, especially with industrialization, like in conjunction with that window of time, people have leaned into that almost as a new religion and said that unless something can be proven through scientific means, then it's wrong, or you're a charlatan, or you're crazy, or you're the devil and you could be burned. So I think that is where my skepticism initially came from. It was born from fear, really. Fear that if I gave into the beliefs and the understandings that were really resonant in my heart about what life can be, especially if it goes against science, that somehow would make me a wrong or bad or endangered person. So I learned to be skeptical and to look at things with a scientific eye and say, well, do we really know that aliens exist? Can we scientifically prove this? Then I'm going to argue it with my ego and I don't want to hear about it, right? Instead of just allowing a sense of openness and exploration.
Well, there's the bridge. There's the meeting place of what you spoke of earlier, Dailey, is that, to move forward, moving into it, living into it. And the skepticism, I think, is a, a good thing in that it lets us know that something new, unknown is like that tapestry, is like that painting there.
Yeah.
And not knowing, like, there's beliefs in there. Like you can believe, like, it's a painting, and someone said, my God, push right into it, and they go, oh, wow, how do we know that? There's so many things that have changed recently around that.
Yeah, I think so.
Everything. I'm meeting with another interviewee, another guest this morning, and we were talking about how everything has gotten digitized.
Yeah.
And
then what is reality?
But conversation, we were talking about commodities, live copper, zinc, the commodities, all sorts of like laundromats and things that we use all the time. And then we got into chatting about it, and then all of a sudden we were in this whole other realm that was as real as the substance of metals.
Right.
He's a jeweler, so it was
nice.
real.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to just say is that a couple nights ago I was watching a program, Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen it yet, but
like, it's just, for me, it's a little bit of I don't even know what to call it other than another era. But what I love to watch is how it changes. Everyone is evolving through this program. And at this one point, they're talking about vacations. And here you have this comedian who is breaking in as a stand-up, and her manager, and the Miss Midge is getting ready to go on a vacation, family vacation in the Catskills, and the manager is like, you can't, we're just in a point of like getting into, your career. You can't take off. And Midge goes, don't you ever take a vacation? And the manager said, yeah. And she goes, oh, great. Where do you go? And she goes, inside my imagination.
Yeah.
Wow. That was as real to her as it was, and there was such financial differences.
Yeah.
The value piece for both of them landed in what was of value to them.
Right.
again, you brought that up earlier in the conversation of, that's a huge, big platform for people. And again, I think that when we can really land ourselves on what our values are, then we can navigate in a really very deeply resourced way with the right people.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that we're still figuring out in society. Like, to me, this whole new age of Aquarius thing is really about understanding what our beliefs and values are, like we've had this experience of living by society's rules. And I think now is really the time where we have to go, are these the rules I want to live by? And I think that's reflected everywhere in so many of these huge movements that have happened over the past few years. Stop Asian Hate, Black Lives Matter, movements around sex and gender, transgender lives, and there's a lot of people that really resist a lot of that. And they're afraid of their own identities somehow being subsumed by movements of other people. And I think that while that may be understandable on some level, like, the fear has to go. And when we can let go of fear, when we can really let go of fear and return to our heart of love, I think that's actually when and how we find what values are truly important to us. Otherwise, we value things based from fear, and that can create divisiveness for no reason.
Yeah, you were talking about earlier about social status.
Yeah,
when you were speaking about that, I was flashing on when I was a child and my own awakenings. I was raised Catholic. I had mystical experiences constantly. I didn't know that they were abnormal. That was what was normal, as you're speaking about. And outside of the home, in church, it's like, I would say certain things and my family would look at me like, not now, Vicchi.
Yeah.
That is, well, for me, it's kind of gone. And I think that the new cloth of what we've all been moving through in some way, very, very challenging way, I think that is starting to be of the past, the social status that we get conditioned by.
I think the shift has been initiated, it reminds me, I had a healing once from I used to get these healings from this wonderful woman, Rebecca, and she would do this healing work and then she would go, yes, the shift has been initiated. And as the recipient, I still felt like crap, but she could see that the seed of the healing had taken root. So she would move on to other topics and other things. And then sure enough, a few days later, I could feel that indeed that shift had been initiated and I was no longer the same person, right? So I feel like your vision, we're seeing where that shift has been initiated and people don't even realize that so much is going to change. It's changing. And there are still some other communities and parts of the world and parts of this country where you do have to be really afraid of what you say, right? But I think the difference here now is that used to be mainstream American culture, a huge part of the river and the tide. But now I like to call it American overculture. It's almost like mainstream culture is actually fairly diverse. There's now this understanding that there are many different experiences of America. I mean, it's always been that way, but it's becoming more people really get that, But the overculture is still this kind of funky crust of, well, things are supposed to be this way, And I think we're starting to let that go.
Yeah.
Overculture. There's an anarchy. There's a revolution right now against that.
Yeah, I was looking at some eucalyptus trees through my walk the other day, and I was looking at it going, that's exactly what we're going through as a culture. Just this, the crust of what used to hold us together is now kind of falling away, and the ripeness of the inside is starting to appear. You know, it's not always fun. And also, one of the things I'd like to just look at the time here. We're pretty well out of time, but I want to say, like, in my practice with my NLP folks, Chris and Tim Hobbaum used to say when they practiced with shamans that people would say, well, when's the healing happening? When did the healing happen? And you brought up such a great point, Dailey. It's like, when you're getting healing, and you're going through it, it doesn't land in the practical, physical. It is through our earthly vessel that we have to move. And sometimes moving means staying still too. But the practice of the shamans, they used to say, the healing happened in the intention.
Right.
And everything else was the ritual. And I see, like, living into 5D, not only as like an entity of a podcast and hosting folks, great, brilliant, wonderful souls like yourself, that we, our ego wants it, so, blah, 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 blah. And if we could, have our want, have our desires, make our wish, and carry on, move forward, knowing that it's
done.
a ritual of doing dishes and living and loving life.
Yeah.
Any last words before we head out?
I just love what we're talking about and what you're saying. And I think I've taught Reiki classes and shamanic classes for like a decade now, maybe more. And it's like, in my mind, I'm still new at it, right? A decade is a drop, but it's enough to start to really understand some things. And what you're saying about intention is so true. And like, there's so much magic in that. And I think that as we go forward through this year and we're looking at things like what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine and the presidency and our presidency and like all of these huge themes and climate change, it's so easy to become overwhelmed and to feel like we have no power and we're nothing. And yet, the magic is in our intention and in us holding this strong vision of what we want this world to become, instead of holding the vision that everything is going to hell in a handbasket, right? And when we have that magical intention and that clarity, we can begin to align our lives with this new future that we're birthing. We can begin to take those tiny steps to bring ourselves into integrity with the new vibration. And I just feel like that is really important. So I love that you were talking about that.
Yeah, that's so spot on for me. Thank you so much for bringing voice and voicing that and speaking that, Dailey, because I think that I, as well as many other people, really get it. Like, wow, it's time. Wait for it. Just wait, again, that the divine feminine energy, learning about it, practicing it, just to receive, put it out there, and then, you got to have the hands open for it. Yeah.
Yes.
We are going to have you back.
That'd be lovely. I know this has been such a rich conversation. I love it.
For me too. Thank you so much, Dailey, Reverend Dailey Little. We will have your information in the description. Please, listeners, connect with us, connect with Dailey. We'll have your contact info. So just want to give you everyone a shout out for that.
Yeah, definitely reach out to me and say hi. I love meeting people. So,
All right, Dailey. Much love. Mwah. Thank you so much.
blessings.